everyone. I'm Jane Hansen, and this week in the arena, from New York to Washington to the Vatican, we are taking a brief look at the issues that have you, the viewers, talking, debating, and questioning. As we begin another season of In the Arena, we wanted to take a look at some of the news headlines, past, present, and future, that have everyone's attention. So joining us, Monsignor Kieran Harrington, the Director of Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn, and our show's regular contributors, Elizabeth Scalia, Managing Editor at the Catholic Portal at Pathos.com and author of the blog The Anchoress, and Grant Gallicho, the Associate Editor of Commonweal magazine. All right, guys, weigh in. What is on people's minds, issues regarding the Catholic Church right now as we start 2011?
I think Milwaukee tops the list. You know, there are over a dozen claims. There's not a real sense of how much that's going to cost the Archdiocese. The Archdiocese has filed for Chapter 11. It's the 8th diocese to do so. So this is the
bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy. It's the legacy of the sexual abuse crisis, and I think it fits perfectly with what the Holy Father described in his address to the Roman Curia back in December, when he kind of addressed this as a real shameful moment in the life of the Church, and this is the legacy of that shame.
Why did it take so long for the Vatican to finally bring this to the forefront?
There were enormous cultural biases inside the Vatican against even acknowledging that this was a global phenomenon. I think when the abuse scandal first started in the late 80s, that when bishops started to become aware of this problem, Rome viewed it as strictly an American problem. You know, secular culture, oversexed, et cetera, consumerism, et cetera. And it's only been over the past 5-10 years, and even more recently, when Europe has started to feel the shockwaves.
How many Catholics do you think are using that as a reason for being disengaged with the Church?
It's convenient.
It's convenient, but it happens
I think
a lot.
I think it's more than. I think that it's just not a convenient excuse for a lot of people. I think a lot of people's faith has been
exclusively.
I do think a lot of people's faiths have been very deeply troubled by this. And what the great concern is that they felt that they put their trust in the Church would protect their children, and the Church didn't. And I think that the Pope, in speaking to the Curia, and I think it's really interesting that he did that in the context of speaking about Hildebard's this notion of shame. And I think that it really is a lesson for us. You know, he spoke about the Church as being like asleep. You know, and I think that has what really has happened. The Pope has sort of identified for us what has happened. We've all been asleep at the switch on this. Children have been hurt, and we've got to just redouble our efforts to make sure that doesn't happen.
When you talk about things like bankruptcy and 8 dioceses around the country having had to file for bankruptcy protection because of the costs of the sex abuse scandal. I mean, aren't there a lot of people who say, well, just get the Vatican to sell a painting, that will cover the cost? But that is such an illegitimate point of view.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, a lot of people do make those kinds of outrageous claims. I mean, people think that there's an unlimited amount of money because the Church is the wealthiest institution. And the fact is our own diocese is in real severe financial straits. We would certainly never be able to accommodate settlements of this sort of magnitude. It's understandable that the Archdiocese of Milwaukee can't. I think that they basically have money free and clear, like $1.6 million. They have property that's worth about $5.5 million. These settlements could total, if 12 or more judgments, it could be more than $100 million.
But could the Vatican step in and absorb some of these costs?
They could, but I mean, they could if they wanted to. But
I don't think they could. I don't think they could. I mean, they would be settling costs for local churches throughout the world, the United States and around the world. It's inconceivable. It's inconceivable.
No, I mean, I'm saying if they wanted to, they could. I don't think legally they would, because I'm not saying that they could settle all of them, people. I'm saying that if there was a case, if there was a particular diocese that someone in Rome wanted to help, that could be done. But it's not going to be done because that would open up a very dangerous legal precedent, which could see suits running up the flagpole to Rome.
I think what your argument is that, you know, the fact is it's not the Pope who's responsible for this. It is individual bishops and individual dioceses and individual priests who have done this. That's the responsible parties, and so individual dioceses really have to bear the cost of this. It's a different question that's being asked, and I think that I think that the fact is that the argument that you made, Jane, a lot of people do have this outrageous notion that the Church has got, you know, trillions and trillions of dollars, the wealthiest entity around there, to settle these claims. And that's really not the case. I mean, the vast amount of the resources of the Church are put at the service of people. It's not like there's money free and clear, so everybody can just go out and have a grand old time. That's just not the case.
My son asked me, actually last night, he said, why doesn't the Vatican sell the Pietà? They could probably get $200 million for it and use that for these purposes or settling other debts. And I said, because we have that in our keeping, but it's not ours to sell.
That's right.
This belongs to the world, and it's just the Vatican is holding on to it. And you don't want to see that go into some kind of private ownership.
So I want to, kind of going down a little bit in this same path, I want to ask you, Elizabeth, what you thought about all of the attention that the Pope received in his comments about condoms.
I think the Pope is extremely smart, and I think that he said what he said in that interview because he knew that it would get attention. And I think he kind of made a back-end run around the whole question of condoms and people who think they are intrinsically evil. And he said what a lot of theologians have been saying for quite some time. I thought it was really not the big controversy. I mean, put the word condom next to Pope, and of course you're going to have headlines and responses and reactions. But in the end, it kind of very quickly dwindled down to, it's not that big a deal.
Grant?
I think the fact that it became such a huge controversy speaks to the low quality of thinking that has happened about contraception. I think certain elements of the Catholic right freaked out. They saw this statement from the Pope, as easily confusing the simple faithful who would then think that you could use a condom for any purpose. When in fact, as we know, that the Pope was just saying what moral theologians have been writing for decades.
Well, say it for the audience.
Well, I mean, what they're saying basically is that a condom is neither good nor bad, right? It's a thing. It's neither good nor bad. It's how it's used that determines whether or not whether it is good or bad. So I think that's the first thing. However, I do think it is significant that the Pope speaks about that issue, especially in light of the AIDS crisis. And I think that his own visit to Africa certainly informs sort of a worldview. He didn't say it at that time. He does say it now, and I think that speaks to a certain sense of real concern for the people who are suffering the scourge of AIDS in Africa. And I think it speaks to really the kind of man that Pope Benedict is. I mean, he's someone who his heart is really touched by these things. I think he's a man whose heart has been touched certainly by the sexual abuse crisis, how he's reached out to victims. I think that trip to Africa, he's been touched by the scourge of AIDS, right. and he's responding to these very real concerns. That's exactly what we're supposed to do as a church. We're supposed to respond to the circumstances that we see around us in the world.
Well, that's the wonderful and fascinating thing about Benedict is that you can see him constantly changing. I don't mean changing or evolving, but it's a deep evolution. It's always a thoughtful evolution. It's never reactionary. And it's such a change from this mindset that the church is and ever was, must be this bulwark, this narrow, limiting bulwark, when he's expanding it in every possible way and still staying within the strictures of the church, which I think is remarkable.
We are going to continue this discussion. Let's take a quick break here. We've got lots of other things that we can talk about. You can join our discussion anytime by going to our website at netny.net/inthearena and click on Enter the Arena. We want to hear from you, your questions, your comments, what else we should talk about in upcoming shows. So let us know what you think. We'll be right back, so stay right here. Welcome back as we continue our discussion, and let's bring this all back closer to home. Talk about the fact that the Archbishop of New York, Timothy Dolan, has become the head of the National Bishops' Conference, which really was kind of a surprise. Were you shocked by that?
I don't think I was really shocked by it. I think that it really is. I think what was interesting was that the former president, Bishop Kincaidis, was not. Typically, he would have been elected president of the conference. It certainly was not an overwhelming majority. I think that Archbishop Dolan is someone who's very, very well liked. I think he is someone who, not only is he well liked, I think he's someone who's very articulate. He's seen as a good voice for the church. I think that the bishops were probably moving in the direction because the Archdiocese of New York really is a primatial see in our country, media capital of the world. So it seemed appropriate.
Okay, well, let's just talk about what this really means. This really means that he is, in essence, the head of the Catholic Church in the United States, right?
No.
It's a little. I mean, he's head of the Bishops' Conference.
What kind of, sort of?
Well, he's head of the body of bishops, but
Right.
there isn't obviously every bishop has his own authority derived from Peter. So it's not like, he will go into a diocese and say, you have to do this and this.
No, but I meant he might, the spokesperson, so to say.
In a way, yeah. I mean,
he's the voice.
He is the
Yeah.
public face of the USCCB.
But I mean, it is important to realize that the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, it's a very collegial body, so they operate in terms of everyone kind of being on the same page. So they speak as teachers with one sort of voice. So I think that the work that the Archbishop is really going to be performing is kind of making sure that the bishops are all on the same page on issues that are going to be really important. For instance, in 2012, we have new elections coming up, and it'll be interesting to see what is the Church's response in terms of the elections. How do we speak about elections? How do we speak about interaction on issues of public policy?
Well, we have discussed a lot on this show about how communication has not been as effective as it could be within the ranks of the Catholic Church. So do you think that his presence will make a big difference?
I was very hopeful when I heard he was elected, because we have often said the church is so stupid about PR, and for once the bishops were smart. And yes, there may be some hurt feelings, there may be a few noses out of joint, but the fact is he is media savvy, he is congenial, he is a happy priest and a happy bishop, and we have very few of those on the scene. And he's larger than life. All of our past presidents have been kind of, Wilton Gregory an exception, but they've all been kind of milquetoast, characterless fellows. Nobody can say that about Archbishop Dolan, and I think he's going to be a great face for the bishops.
Yeah, I think that's basically true. However, this is the first time that really a smear campaign has been waged against one of the bishops who stood for the post. Kikanis had been attacked by Catholic conservatives for his supposed role as a seminary rector when a man who went on to abuse was a student there. And it was a very unseemly campaign that was waged. There were phone calls made to hotel rooms, text messages sent to bishops. It was surprisingly well crafted. Yeah, and Archbishop Dolan was asked about that at the press conference, and wanting to put on a good face, he sort of brushed it aside. But it really did happen, and it's never happened before.
Okay,
right,
but I mean, the fact is that some folks who might have had a different agenda were sort of injecting themselves in this way.
Yes.
It doesn't make illegitimate the fact that what Elizabeth is really kind of referencing, and I think was really the prime motivation, is that there was a real concern that the church really needed to have its act together in terms of how we communicated to the rest of the world, and the best person to do that was Archbishop Dolan. And I think that was really driving the bus.
And I think there was a secondary notion there that we really don't want to have a president who's going to be the next big headline, whether it's deserved or not, whether it's fair or not. It's going to be the next big headline. Let's
wait a minute.
stop
What about
that
a
in its
headline,
tracks.
though? Because he was in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee has just filed for bankruptcy. The archdiocese there. I mean,
Yeah, but I don't think that I think that, listen, Archbishop Dolan has been fairly well vetted by the New York Times when he was appointed the Archbishop of New York, and there didn't seem to be any real question in terms of how he handled cases, whether in Milwaukee or in St. Louis. So my suspicion is while there might have been some handlings, the real question is really the handlings that were under Archbishop Dolan's predecessor, Archbishop Weakland, and the bishop who really handled those cases, Bishop Gilbert. So I think that Dolan is in the free and clear on that.
Okay, so let's go on and talk about the don't ask, don't tell policy that, with the U.S. military that has now been repealed. How do you guys feel about that?
I think it was retrograde, and we need all the soldiers we can get. So I fully support it.
I'm opposed to repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I think that really in every moment we have to really oppose efforts to sort of make the very public living of homosexual culture acceptable in our society. So I think that...
and when you say we, you mean Catholics?
I think it's Catholics. I mean, I think there's really an effort to pass same-sex marriage.
And
it's
you
really
think that the military is in danger of growing a gay subculture in its ranks?
What I think is a concern for me is so will military benefits be extended to spouses of servicemen or women who are serving who identify as gay, spousal benefits. That's a concern for me. I think that there really has to be, what I have a great concern about is that there seems to be in broader American culture a sense of toleration, but not just a toleration, really there's a proposition that the actively homosexual lifestyle is a legitimate way in which one can live, a homosexual subculture, let's say. It's to make it no longer a subculture, but to make it part of the broader culture. I have a problem with that, and I think that the church has got to vigorously oppose efforts at that at every step of the way. Otherwise, we will have same-sex marriage as part of...
You see Don't Ask, Don't Tell leading to same-sex marriage?
I think that there is an expansion of making this subculture very much part of the broader American culture, which I think we have to oppose.
You're concerned about it becoming ingrained in the culture. Elizabeth, want to weigh in on this?
I don't disagree with you in the points you're making, but on the other hand, my concern about Don't Ask, Don't Tell was you have some very fine soldiers who are in the closet, and being in the closet kind of opens them up for blackmail, for torture if they're engaged and captured. I think that there's also that to be considered. You're putting soldiers at risk because they're in the closet.
Yeah,
So
I don't think there was
concerns.
any sense, I don't think that anyone really identified the fact that soldiers were being put at risk for torture. I think that the issue was really that there are people who should have the opportunity to serve, whether irrespective of their orientation. And I think that, to me, that's not the case. A service to our country is a privilege. I don't think that it should be equally extended to everybody. If someone wants to identify themselves publicly as embracing a same-sex or homosexual lifestyle, that privilege should not be extended to them.
All right, we need to switch subjects to talk about the Congress, new governor. We've got all kinds of changes going on. What do you guys expect in terms of the relationship to the Catholic Church and Catholic principles out of this new Congress?
Well, the last Speaker of the House was Catholic and didn't really impact very much of the legislation. And the new Speaker is Catholic, and I don't know if that's going to make any difference at all in how they legislate. I don't know if it's a big deal. I think the Republicans who've just come into power have a huge debt to pay to the Tea Party and to a very conservative base that brought them in and expects them to behave in follow along conservative lines. And I think for a little while they're going to serve that, but I don't think it's going to last.
I think poverty is a huge issue. It's a big issue for Catholics. I don't really expect the Republican House to do much on poverty. But if the Republicans and Democrats...
What would you like them to do?
Well, one of
Make people not poor.
Yes, I mean, I think they should just give money to the poor.
Well,
yeah,
it might be better than some of the other things we give money
but
to.
one of the things that was just passed is that there was the unemployment benefits extended.
Right.
And that's a huge boon to working poor families. That was one way in which the Democrats and the conservatives came, to the same judgment. That was part of that tax compromise. I would like to see more of that, and I think there's a good economic argument to be made.
I think one of the biggest problems we face right now is that there is no one seriously taking a look at entitlement spending. Clearly, Medicare is out of control. The spending related to Medicare is out of control. The spending related to Social Security is out of control. And Grant, I have to respectfully disagree with you. I think that tax, the most recent tax bill that was passed, is a disaster for us. It kicks the can down the road, and it shows really an unwillingness on both sides, whether Republican or conservative, to address serious issues. And I think that is I think that that's a major concern going forward. And the fact is I think that there does need to be the Republicans control the House of Representatives. They don't control the Congress. So the president, the Democratic Party still controls the Senate, the United States Senate, and the White House. So they still have a huge say in terms of how this government is going to be formed. But unless the Democrats and Republicans get together and really address entitlement spending, the posterity, our posterity, are those who are children. They're going to be given a huge burden to carry, and really insurmountable burden.
You look like you want to respond.
Well, I just am thinking one thing that I would really like to see also is some redirection on the stimulus spending. I wish somebody would take control, take a look at where the stimulus money is going, and question it and pull back a little bit. I just read an article the other day might have been this morning, that 40,000 students and their teachers were being given free laptops in Detroit. Now, on one hand, great, everybody should be getting on the internet and benefiting from what they can learn there. On the other hand, is that really stimulus money? Is that really going to stimulate the economy?
You know, there really does need to be a look at this, because when my father was my age, he was retired as a New York City police officer. Retired as a New York City police officer, he was 40 years old, half pay. Now, you wonder, how can the government sustain my father's pension, those who were after him's pension, and the guy who's working in the job now?
Yeah, but we
It's
didn't live
impossible.
as long then. I mean, there are a lot of other...
Well, then maybe there needs to be means testing of Social Security. Maybe there needs to be adjustments for ages regarding Social Security.
That's
maybe
coming.
employee
There's not
pension
going to be
benefits.
means testing, but
By the
all of
time
that
you're
is coming.
65,
I don't.
forget it.
That's fine. I'm happy to let my mom cash those checks.
We are going to take a final break. You can join our discussion anytime by going to our website at netny.net/InTheArena and click on Enter the Arena. We welcome your questions and your comments, and we're going to be right back to wrap things up. Welcome back to In the Arena. We're talking with Monsignor Harrington, Grant, Elizabeth. Okay, so the Pope is making some big trips this year, particularly what he's talking about in Assisi. What is that all about, and what do we expect?
He's in October going to hold a meeting, probably of high-level leaders, to discuss the ways that the world religions can help to foster peace. And in light of recent anti-Christian violence, I think it's going to be a really powerful move. And it's also interesting because, as Cardinal Ratzinger, he said some sort of critical things about, or he seemed to indicate that he wasn't totally happy with the way John Paul had conducted a similar meeting, where there was a kind of overlap between Muslim prayers and Catholic Mass.
Well, I think that the big issue here is that there is really a movement among some secular elites to kind of push God out of the conversation and really hold God accountable for all the wars and all the bad things that have happened in the world.
There have been an awful lot of wars that have been waged in the name of religion and God.
There have been a lot more wars waged in the interest of economic interest and power, expansion of power. And I think that it's important, especially today in today's day and age, when you consider the last century, when you take a look at each of the dictators, whether it be Stalin or Hitler, these were people who promoted an anti-God agenda, push God out of the discussion, put him out of the equation, and it's then when you had the greatest degradation of human dignity. And I think that what Pope Benedict has been trying to say is that God really needs to be a part of our conversation, whether in Europe, United States, elsewhere. He references Alex de Tocqueville, interestingly enough, in some of his addresses, saying that there's got to be this common strain that we all kind of agree with. And I think that the common element that we can all sort of agree with is the dignity of the human person.
Well, what he said specifically was freedom of religion is the path to peace. And I think he's looking at the fact that you can go to Jerusalem and you can see Christians who are free to worship there. You can see Muslims who are free to worship there. Everyone's engaged in their religion. And yet if you go to Saudi Arabia, you go to various other parts in the Arab Middle East, this is not also true. And
that holds important lessons not only for the Middle East, but for New York City.
well, yes, absolutely, but you interrupted me, so I didn't get to finish my thought. But I think he's trying to make this point to the whole world, including New York, that, freedom of religion, respectful freedom of religion and freedom of worship is absolutely essential before we can go forward to make any kind of peace. It's great to be John Paul.
Freedom of religion is not something that's personal, just me and God, me and Jesus, right? But there is a public dimension to the expression of my religion, and that's the reason why freedom of religion, I think, is so important. And I think that one of the things that is important for Christians also to realize is that sometimes our own example is so offensive to the rest of the world that it's hard for them to take our expression of religion very seriously. And I think that so when you take a look at secular cultures or predominantly Western world and how that maybe the optics through which that's being seen, whether in the Buddhist world or in the Hindu world or in the Muslim world, it can be sort of scandalous to them. So whether it be the excessive materialism, or the seductive elements or lasciviousness of our society, all of these can be sort of off-putting to those who are aggressive in the pursuit of their religious faith.
Ride the mass transit in New York, and you can get occasionally a great situation or a seat where you'll see one person with a rosary and a Muslim with prayer beads and a Buddhist with his beads, and you say to yourself, this is how it should be. And I really think that what Benedict is trying to do is get everybody around the table and say, how do we achieve that?
Get in the subway car. Last thoughts?
I'm looking forward to our follow-up show after that October meeting. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be very, very revealing.
We're going to have many before then, though. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Elizabeth. Last thought, Monsignor?
No, I think the Holy Father's trip to the United Kingdom was really a great table setter for a lot of these discussions. To speak in Westminster, I think was phenomenal about the role of religion and the important role that people of faith have in being a leaven in society. I think it's going to be really important. I think it's going to be a big theme we'll see throughout the rest of the year.
All right. Thank you all so much, and thank you for joining us. And remember that you don't need a TV to watch the net. We are always online at netny.net. For all of us here, I'm Jane Hanson. We'll see you next time in the arena.